Welcome back to Island Bowls Live. I'm Jeff Bolton, and it's my mission to try and get you to try lawn bowling. Okay, this is a good one today. So you'll remember in a past video, I said that there were 3 things you needed to worry about when you were choosing your lawn bowls for your first game. Those 3 things were the size, how you size your lawn bowl, the grips on that bowl, and the third thing was the bias. Today, we're talking bias. Oh, it's exciting. Okay, exactly what is bias though? Well, the bias is the arc the bowl takes, the path that bowl takes from the time it leaves your hand to the time it nestles next to the jack. That is the bias. Now, a bit of a history lesson for you. Up until 1893, biases were all over the place. In fact, even within a set of 4 lawn bowls, you could have 4 different biases. It made it difficult for players, as you can imagine, to really comprehend what they were doing out on the green. So, in 1893, the Scottish Bowls Association approached a bowls manufacturer and said, we want you to standardize the bias. And to do that, we want you to produce 5 different biases. By the way, the person they approached, the company they approached, Thomas Taylor. Taylor Bowls. Taylor Bowls, by the way, the oldest manufacturer still to date in lawn bowling, dating back to the late 1700s, by the way. So Thomas Taylor took the brief back and said, yes, okay, I'm going to make 5 different biased lawn bowls. He came back to the SBA, Scottish Bowls Association, with 5 of them. First one was straighter. Second one had a slight curve. Number 3 had a medium curve. 4th was a wide curve, and the 5th was the widest curve. The Scottish Bowls Association took a couple of weeks to determine what they were going to do, came back with an edict saying the number 3, the medium curve, was the new standard. Fascinating. They said numbers 2 and number 1 you can no longer use. Number 3, 4, or 5, go ahead. Bowls manufacturers at the time, Thomas Taylor and Drake's Pride, were now able to produce bowls with biases that were standard. Every set could now be more or less trusted for the bias they would take to the head. Now I'm going to come back and talk a bit about number 1 bias and number 2 bias not being allowed to be used in 1893, because there are some implications here in Canada, and certainly I'm certain probably in your clubs as well. But I'll get to that in a minute. So, what is bias exactly? Well, I've told you it's the path it takes. But where is it? How is it? What's going on? So, when I first got to lawn bowling, I was convinced the way manufacturers got bias into the bowls was by putting a weight on one side of the bowl to make it turn. By the way, my opinion was shared, so you might be laughing, but go ahead. I can tell you that there were other people that also shared that opinion, okay? Not true, obviously. The way manufacturers create the bias is by taking a little material out of here, precisely, instead of here. The small logo is the way the bowl will turn on the bias. So if the bowl's on this side, small logo, bowl's going to go this way. If the logo's on this side, it's going to curve that way. And just a little imperceptible amount of materials removed from here to make that bias. Can you tell the difference? I can't. Each manufacturer now is able to put a bias on their bowl. As the bowl slows down, the bowl begins to turn. Okay, so all good, all good. They start, their bowls are being made, their biases are standardized, and the game's in good shape. Bowls manufacturers began to experiment with all sorts of different biases. And dozens and dozens of them. And some of them have been determined to be much more forgivable depending on the surface. Now this comes back to, remember I told you number 1 and number 2 biases were no longer permitted back in 1893. Okay, hang with me here for a second. Let's say you're playing lawn bowling in Australia. It's the middle of summer. That green you're playing on is going to be very fast. What does that mean? The time it takes your lawn bowl from delivery to rest in the head, 17 seconds. It'll take 17 seconds for this to slow down enough to stop. that means that the bias in your lawn bowl can be even more imperceptible, minute, because it's rolling much more slowly down the green. Why is that important here in Canada? Well, I can tell you, if you brought a lawn bowl up from Australia that is like a Dreamline XG, as an example, and we've got a Dreamline XG here at the club. If you use that lawn bowl on a slow green, our greens are 12 seconds. By the way, at the moment in spring, they're actually a little slower than that. In the summer, they might be a tad faster. And I'll give it to you that in some places in Canada and the US, your greens might be as fast as Australia. But in most cases, they're slow. If you use that Dreamline XG in Canada on our green, you're gonna have to roll it with a much more force. 12 seconds for you to get down to the jack, which means that that imperceptible amount of bias that's been carved into the bowl will be negated. And that bowl will go pretty straight. What's the issue? Okay, depending on where you're playing and the opposition you're playing, some people get upset if your bowls are abnormally straight. Why is that? Because the nature of the game is that your bowl curves on the way to the jack. That's what makes it fun. It's lawn bowls, not bowling. And if you can roll your bowl straight down the green to the jack, you've got an unfair advantage in the eyes of some people. If you're playing lead and you've got a straight bowl, you can get to that jack much more easily than you can if you've got a curved bowl. Right, so sometimes when you're playing in a league game and your opposition lead has got a very straight bowl, you might be looking a little cross-eyed at them, right? A little side-eye action. So some places don't like that. Additionally, if you're playing lead with a straight bowl, you're never going to be able to play skip. It's too straight. So for me, I think the nature of the game is to have the bias in the bowl. And I think you should really experiment with the bowls at your club to figure out which bias is best for you. I've gone with the Henselite Tiger because it's a good all-round bowl. I can use it as lead, I can use it as a skip, no problem. There are a bunch of bowls out there that meet the same parameters. Bowls like the Taylor Ace, Drake's Pride XPs, the Drake's Pride Professionals, the Aero Sonics, Aero Groove, Henselite Tiger, Tiger 2s, they're all great bowls for slow greens. But just be aware when you're playing, it is about the bias, all right? So listen, that's your bias lesson today. I hope you enjoyed it. If you've got a topic, by the way, you'd like me to cover, yeah, shoot me an email, drop by my website, islandbowlslive.ca, and send me a suggestion. I'd love to hear from you. And by the way, I am now live streaming bowl games on the island and Lower Mainland. If your club has a big championship game coming up or a big tournament coming up and you want the finals broadcast out to the world, Island Bowls Live can do that for you. Please drop me a line, islandbowlslive.ca. That's where you can go to find out more information. All right, until next time, I'm Jeff Poulton for islandbowlslive.ca. Keep 'em rolling.